What's going on, everybody? You know what time it is. It is Friday afternoon out here in Southern California. It's Friday evening over here on the East Coast of the United States. It's late Friday over there in Europe. It might even be Saturday, depending on where you are in the world. But no matter where you are, you know what time it is. It is time for Cinema Crusaders, the show where we look at movies that are at least 10 years old that we think deserve another look. We talk about them, we break them down, and we hope that you will give them a look as well after you hear us reintroduce them to the modern audience. So, before I can talk about the movie we are introducing today, which, by the way, is Runaway Train from 1985, we are following Rebecca DeMornay from her cameo appearance, I think that's fair to say it, in Identity, all the way over here to 1985's Runaway Train, starring her and John Voight, amongst others. I need to introduce the gentlemen who are my fellow Cinema Crusaders who make it possible for us to do this show. So, without further ado, let me introduce first a man who is an academic, a writer, a comic book writer, a novelist, an all-around excellent human being, and an encyclopedia of knowledge when it comes to a variety of comic and nerd-related topics, including Doctor Who. And by the way, I have to mention, as always, that he is the owner of a beagle. I'm talking about none other than Steve Shadewing Sellers.
Yeah, this is an interesting movie. I had not heard of it. This was new to me, and I almost delightfully so, because it's actually really, really good. It was better than I kind of expected going in. And it got better as it went, which is always nice.
Yo.
But the thing of it is that this is a dark movie in many respects. Like, there are no really good people in this movie. And yet, for all of that, it still managed to capture my attention. And I ended up actually, appreciating some of the characters by the end of it. And that takes some craft. So hands off to this movie. It did really well for me.
Yeah, when we get into the intro of the film, I will definitely hit on that a little bit. But my first thought, the first half of the movie, was this movie is out Shawshanking Shawshank. So it was interesting.
We got Shawshanked.
Yeah. Before we move on to that, I want to introduce another Cinema Crusader. He is a filmmaker, a comic writer. He does... he's done wigs, so I forget what you call that. He does a whole host of things. He's a screenwriter. He's just a multi-talented man who is probably one of the hardest working men in show business, taking over that title from the late, great James Brown. Yes, that's right. Lance Lucero is out there doing the James Brown shuffle. Say it proud. None other than Lance Lucero here.
Hey, I feel good. Real good. Yeah.
Awesome. So,
yeah, interesting flick. This is one that has been imprinted in my mind since 1985. I mean, it kind of I caught this on home video. I didn't make it to the theater to see it because it was so, it was obscure. It was off the wall. It was almost art house. Mm-hmm. And it was there. It was gone. It got a lot of praise, and then it stuck in my mind since then. So I'm glad there was that interesting link of Rebecca DeMornay from our last round of Identity, like you say, her cameo, to this very pivotal role she had in this very dark prison movie, I should say.
Now, this is an interesting question. The first thing I thought of when you said Runaway Train was this song. I don't think it is. I think it's just a coincidence. So,
Yeah, I think it's coincidence.
Yeah, I can't roll it out, but it's more than likely coincidence.
Yeah. So to sum up this movie real quick, we go, first of all, I have to say the setting is unique because there aren't many movies like this that would be set in Alaska, of all places. Usually if you're going to have this type of movie, you're setting it in the South, or you might have it in the Rockies in Colorado if you wanted snow. But we don't go up to the peninsula up there in Alaska and do stuff like this a lot of the time. So right there off the bat, the stakes, it's winter, it's cold, the trains are going and everything. So it's an interesting setting. And basically what it is we got this maximum security prison up there, which is being run. I mean, the place is run down. The warden is a jerk. He's had this guy, Manny, played by John Voight, actually welded into a cell for 3 years. And that's how we start the movie, where the prison, the warden is ordered by a judge to let him out. And of course, the warden wants this guy's head. He wants him killed. The warden is a complete psychopath. And he pushes John Voight to eventually escape from prison. And he brings along with him Buck, played by Eric Roberts. And the first half of the movie is all about life in this prison, then eventually the escape and everything. But eventually they get on the runaway train. And the second half of the movie is really a 3-part. There's vignettes out in other places, but it's centered around 3 people: Buck, Manny, and then eventually Rebecca DeMornay's character called Sarah. Correct?
Sarah.
Yeah, and it's a human drama around these 3, and we're delving more into their personalities. It's like all of a sudden, it's almost like if it was a Twilight Zone episode. This train is a one-way express barreling towards hell, and they're being forced to face their fears in their life, and Manny decides to give them the exit off of this one-way trip to hell with a valiant sacrifice. I'm going to say it's valiant because it really is. He lives up to his own hype in the end when he fell short. And so it's really, the whole movie is about it really focuses on Manny, I think, the myth, who he is. Then the man kind of gets deconstructed and fails to live up to the myth, and then rises to the challenge right before he's going to shuffle off the mortal coil. So that's what I took off of it. Before we go forward, do you guys think that's a fair synopsis, or are they points I missed that you want to bring up? So,
I would bring up one, and that is that, well, I think you're generally on point with this. And I will say, as an aside, if he really lived up to it, he would be suplexing that train. Final Fantasy VI players will get the reference. But yeah, I think some of it is about, in the end, it's about a man finding freedom in his own mind. Because this is somebody who was going to head to the gallows. Basically, he was going to face the death penalty, by the state, essentially, because of whatever crime that he committed. But and he's trying to get away from that, by taking the train and heading out. He's all talking about, I'm here looking for freedom and I'm living this life, and I think he realizes at the end is that true freedom is going out of it on your own terms, the way that you want to. And this is a man who, for better or worse, lives by his own, I don't want to say code, but more like he lives his life his way. And, he decides to go out, on his own terms. He's not going to let anybody tell him how he's going to die. He's decided, I'm going to die for something. And he decides to choose to go out this way, and taking the warden out with him. And I have to say it's an awesome death.
Cool. What about you, Lance? What do you think?
Yeah, pretty much on point. I do think it's somewhat of a morality tale as well when you really look at it with the Manny character. I mean, obviously he's doomed,
right?
And no matter what, he's got to face that doom. He's got to own up to his doom, whether it's living a life in prison or getting hunted down by that crazy warden. Played brilliantly. What was his name again? By John P. Ryan.
Yeah. Rankin.
Rankin.
What a name, Rankin.
Right. It even sounds yucky, but I think the morality tale of it is, yes, he fails to live up to this mythological hype, from really who? A bunch of inmates? I mean,
yeah.
Who really cares? This is kind of one of those things where, look, I think there's a psychological element to most prison movies. Usually we follow the innocently incarcerated person, which audiences can get behind. And that's what makes the movie bearable. But in this sense, he's a bad guy, and maybe he deserves to be locked in welded into a cell because he's a bad guy. He escapes, he commits crimes, he goes back. He's habitual. Is there any reform for this person? So usually with prison movies, I go into it not feeling an ounce of sorry for any of the characters because they're there for a reason. And so what if they suffer? That's the way it should be.
Right.
So the morality is we're watching him kind of basically own up to his existence. And so he does one good thing. But does he really do a good thing? I mean, would it have all worked out the same if he didn't hop that train? Who knows?
I think he did. When I said valiant, I think he did it. It was valiant because he faced himself and came face to face with a truth that he embraced, not because it was the heroic, because he was trying to save other people. I think what it was is that Manny believed that he was this free spirit who was fighting the system and couldn't give a F about what happened as long as he was living, his best life. And there was a moment where, you see that he's afraid to die. And then he reignited that spark in him where he was like, I'm just going to go out on, like you were both saying, go out on my terms, it's one of those giant middle finger to society type movies, really. So.
Yeah, I do wonder to a certain extent whether some of it is he felt that Buck had some hope for himself. And because he knows he's doomed. He's like, I don't know why you came along with me. I'm doomed. You shouldn't be following me. What you should be doing is going, across the border and, getting any kind of a job, no matter how menial, and shine the floors. And I think that might have been why he does break the train car and he gives them a chance.
This is one of those movies where there's a lot of philosophy you could talk about. Let me throw this up there real quick. Is this guy like the Warden in Alternate Comics, the chair bad? He is like, take the Warden in Shawshank Redemption and give him a mean psychotic streak. And then put a little bit of Tommy Lee Jones, but the work from The Fugitive, but the worst of Tommy Lee Jones in there, and you've got this guy. This guy who is trying to get on a moving train from a helicopter for God knows what reason. He's the warden of a damn prison, for God's sake, so.
Yeah. I'll also add to Mike that he is Prince John level punchable.
Yeah, he's a lunatic. Before we get into the characters, and there are 4 for sure I want to break down, but like I said, I got lots of questions on story, and I don't think we could skip over the filmmaking aspect of this movie as well, because there's a lot of great stuff in here. So we got a lot to talk about. But Steve hit on it a little bit, and I want to go around the horn. I'm going to start with Lance first. One line really stood out to me, and I think that the screenwriter was trying to say something with this, and I want to hear what your interpretations were. And it was that line where Manny is talking about, you go get a job and you don't look at the boss and you take all their shit and you pick up your paycheck on Friday. But then Manny looks off in the distance and he goes, I wish I could be that guy. I wish I could be that guy. So I think there's just layers of depth there. And I wanted to hear what if anything, that meant to you. And I'm going to go to Lance first. So,
yeah. Well, that's a dialogue that stands out perfectly. And it's something that I think actors should pay attention to if they're going to replicate any kind of dialogue, for auditioning. It's like, look at that scene, because you can actually see the depth of the desperation of how many bad decisions he had made in his life. When, you pick your prison, you can be in a cubicle, like we were talking about in Office Space. You're a slave to that man. How can you live with it? How can you tolerate it? And it doesn't matter if you work in a janitorial job or whatever. You pick your prison. It's just, how can you tolerate it? He's in actual prison. And I think he finally realized the idea of, wow, it would have been better just to, I think he was a safecracker, robbing banks, always escaping from prison. I mean, that was just a game to him. That was just his game, which turned into a lifestyle. And that's no way to live. You know what I mean? Sure. So I think behind those crazy eyes, he really does wish he had that menial job, even if it's so-called skillless, just so he can still live freely. whatever that means. I think that's a very poignant line in the movie, and he's trying to get through to Buck, who is a complete dumbass. I mean, he is just a dumbass, and he still doesn't get it. I don't think he will never get it in the end, but at least he, as a teacher or even a pathetic mentor, he had that much logic to say to a person. That's the knowledge I'm going to hand to you, rather than be a tough guy and watch your back and fight in prison. No, he's telling him, just keep your head down. Don't do anything stupid. Live your life like that. You're going to be better off. So that sums up Manny's character. That dialogue there, that sums up his character, I think. And that's what makes it such a riveting performance. It's amazing.
See, what was interesting to me is I agree with you, and I think that he was, having a catharsis there. But then by the end, it's like he realized he could never be that person, and he just decided to embrace who he was and go out the way he lived. So which is an interesting choice. It's dare I say it? I mean, we talked about it before backhand. The guy who wrote this was Akira Kurosawa. And it's almost like he went out Bushido style, like a samurai, embraced his death. Steve, what about you with that line?
Yeah, I already discussed some of this, but I think a lot of it also is, and I will say firstly, Buck is a dumbass. This is like the dumbest character that Eric Roberts has played, as far as I can tell. His escape was acceptance. Yeah. He is stuck in the life he knows, and that's the thing. He's a mad dog, Manny. This is somebody who has a violent streak in him, who embraces violence as a way of life, and who enjoys it and revels in it. And you can kind of tell the way that he's constantly poking and prodding at the warden, like he forgets everything that he tells Buck earlier because he's so fixated on showing up the warden, and giving him his just desserts and all of this. He is so consumed with anger against him that he's forgetting, everybody that brought him there and what, he was trying to get Buck out of it. So he forgets his own lessons at that point, but at the same time, I think he kind of realizes, I am what I am. I'm going to go out the way I am, but I'm going to give these guys a chance to save themselves. And I think that's kind of interesting. He's a really fascinating character. I mean, he's a character who's completely doomed, but on some level, he kind of knows it. And I think he's sort of saying, look, you're a dumbass, but you don't have to live the way that I've lived. And I think you're stupid for wanting to live like me. And I think that's really interesting. But then he completely forgets himself at times, because he is that mad dog character. So the contrast between the wild-eyed, nut job and this person who has lived life, who has learned some hard lessons from it and is trying not to be that person. I think that's a great contrast.
Mm-hmm. I will have to say though, his plan, and we kind of lapsed into talking about the characters yet. So let's contrast these two, Manny and Rankin, the warden. But I think Manny's whole plan originally was to get to Acapulco and live the quiet life by the beach. I don't think that would have ever worked out for him. I think he would have been arrested within 6 months and been in a Mexican jail for robbing a bank. It's just, it is who he is. And, I think that he would have come to that realization, which is why he would have robbed the bank in the first place. Contrast that though. And I think there's some interesting commentary, whether it's intentional or not, about the fact that the guy who is his jailer is every bit the criminal he is. He's every bit the psychotic that he is. And I will also say that, John P. Ryan gave every bit the performance that John Voight did.
Heck
So the only difference is that Manny's more honest about who he is and more honest with himself about who he is.
Well,
the Rankin character just cloaks himself in virtue and cloaks himself in the law. And in the meanwhile, he's bullying this poor guy who's just trying to protect these people from the train.
Well, and Rankin is a less virtuous Javert, if that's possible. So
yeah.
And it's kind of funny too how when you really think about the pissing contest it is that Rankin and Manny have about their own mythos. I mean, think about it. Rankin, he has every opportunity. I mean, just think if he succeeded, on the helicopter, jumping on the train, actually killing Manny and stopping the train. He would have been the new legend. He would have been the guy that slayed the dragon. And I think that's all he was after. I think it's all about his own ego that got him killed.
But I think that this guy, yes, I mean, I think he was after that. He's after the glory or whatever else he's going for. But I think the guy truly is homicidal, and it's just he chose to take the corrections department route and stay out of prison somehow. But I mean, this guy,
he's a killer with a badge.
Let me throw it out there. I think that the guy who tries to stab Manny at the boxing match was sent by the warden.
I think so. Manny seemed to think that too, and I think he absolutely that was the case.
I think it was too. Yeah, he was basically bullied by the warden or struck a deal. If you do this, you're gonna, I don't know, get extra sandwiches. Who knows what the deal was?
Well, not only that, I think that the thing that really gives it away is that the guy doesn't pull out a prison shiv. He pulls out a full-on knife, a nice one. I'm like, where the hell did this guy get that from? So
they would have confiscated that in a minute. Yeah.
Yep.
See, isn't man accepting who he is really just taking the easy road? It's not like people can't change. I think that he's on the road he was on all roads led back to prison eventually or dead. It was one or the other. And I think
so. It's like if he's going to die, it's like, he's going to die the way he wants to die, not the way society wants him to die.
Yeah, because the guy, and this is what is Manny's flaws, I think, and correct me guys if you see this a different way, but Manny is one of those people. There are other characters that I'm trying to think of, but it's escaping my mind. One of these people that can't beat their inner demons. It's like they know how they want to change and who they want to be, but they always revert back to type, and we know people like that, so it's like, hey, you shouldn't be eating yourself into an early grave, give up sweets, or because you got diabetes. And yet there they are every week out there, eating cake and
he's gotten the taste of blood and he likes it. So, that is a lot of it.
He's a safe cracker that likes to rob and escape from prison. And then it's habitual. It just keeps a vicious circle going. And, even like you said, he wouldn't have made it if he made it out of the country. Yeah, he would have wound up dead or in another prison.
Yeah. And to be honest with you, the interesting part is that the warden is exactly the same way. The warden, he died because of his own stupidity. First of all, he didn't have to go out there and John Wayne it and go after himself. He's got state police. He's got all the resources of the state to go after him. And yet this guy is out in a helicopter with two other dudes looking for him by himself. I'm like,
he's also an egotist. I mean, this is a guy who wants to take the credit for everything. And also probably it's because he wants to save his job because he doesn't want to be known as the guy who let the guy out. So he thinks that he has to do this in order to save his job.
He's a bully. He's the absolute.
Totally.
If you could pick the worst type of personality to be in charge of a prison, it's this guy. So he's absolutely terrible. I want to contrast that. Hold on. Like wearing a groove in a bowling lane. Yeah. Yep. Let's contrast that with the two other characters I think go together. And I'm going to go to Lance first on this. Buck, played by Eric Roberts, and Sarah, played by Rebecca DeMornay. So.
Well, Buck he's a hopeless romantic in the wrong way. You know what I mean? In the absolute wrong way. And, he's a fighter. He's a boxer. There could be damage there. We don't know. That's what he knows. That and the glory of winning. He didn't have to go along with Manny, but like you said, he was a hero. And it's the wrong type of hero. Just thumbing your nose at the man doesn't make you a hero. What does it do? It gets you locked in a cell for 3 years. And it gets you in trouble. But he just can't see that. So I think he's a hopeless romantic in the wrong way.
Well, I think the crime that brought him into prison even shows that he's an idiot who thinks of himself as a hopeless romantic because he's in prison for statutory rape, and he's waxing romantic about the fact that he was dating a 15-year-old, So it's like,
yeah, it's one of those
He's a
things.
moron.
He's a moron, and when you work with performers, you always got to remind them not to judge the character they're playing. They just got to play them. So I think this is a perfect example of where you can see very good performers playing very flawed people to perfection. It's like, okay, this is how this movie is gripping. The flaws are flying everywhere, just like the human existence, and these people play it perfectly. Um, even to the basicness of Rebecca DeMornay, who, she fell asleep. If she didn't fall asleep, which is against the rules, she probably could have saved the train and helped her colleague who had a heart attack. She's a flawed character. She's a lazy worker. She failed at her job, and there's a price for that. You know what I mean? There's a price for that. The potential of dying, wrecking the train near a what was it, a chemical plant. So those little mistakes, you think just she has that job that John Voight wants, but yet she fucked it up. You know what I mean? That's the contrast. And although she knows her job and she's trying to correct what happened, she can't. But being stuck on the train with two hardcore felons, even when they turn on each other, you can see how she goes down that path of shouting, kill him. It's like she's not really taking the high ground. She's not really a person that I would rely on, that I would hire, whatever. But there she is, another horribly flawed character. But at the same time, she doesn't want to die. She wants to do anything she can to stop the train.
I'm going to hand it over to Steve, but I'll also say about the character of Sarah that I think it's interesting that, the pairings are pretty perfect from a screenwriting perspective. We've got the comparison between Rankin and Manny, and then here we have the hopeless romantic and the cockeyed optimist, both of them delusional in their, optimism about two different things, but still their optimism. I mean, Rebecca DeMornay's character, Sarah, is convinced that divine providence is going to save them. And then when she has that shattered, she falls from all the way up here down to the depths of despair and becomes the very worst version of herself, So it's such an interesting journey that they take us on. Pass it on to Steve to continue. Any thoughts you have? So,
I think the last thing I'm going to say about Buck is that, we're talking about a very smart actor playing a very dumb character. And we know that Eric Roberts is a very smart actor because he plays very smart characters very convincingly. So somebody like the Master, from Doctor Who, for example, I mean, that's a very smart character and he played it pretty well. Even in an otherwise bad movie. All these other characters that he plays, mob bosses and things like that. This is a very smart man who, is capable of playing all kinds of roles. And yet he plays this idiot to complete perfection. And it's great. And yeah, he is a hopeless romantic. He is all of these things. The other thing with DeMornay's character, Sarah, is that it's not that she has blind faith in Providence. She has a blind faith in her bosses. She thinks that these guys are going to come in and save her, but it's like, we've seen who these guys are, and one of them is Baron Harkonnen. Who,
right?
Hellmuth McMillan is going to save me. No. He only cares. He doesn't care. He just cares about his bottom line and how it affects him. He does not give a crap about these people. In fact, he's more than willing. He very nearly let them die, and if not for Barstow's quick thinking, they would have been dead before that.
I mean that. Go ahead, keep going.
Yeah, so she's somebody who has a blind faith in her company and in the people that are in charge of her, and she's just sort of going along thinking that if I go ahead and just be a good worker and all of this, then everything will be fine. No, everything will not be fine. They do not care about you. Right. And she finds this out at the last minute, and this is part of what contributes, I think, to her complete collapse at the end. And the other thing I will also add, now that I remember, is part of the problem is that the hero worship of Manny from Buck's perspective, and why is what makes Manny so tough? The fact that he's the alpha dog of the prison. And how do you become alpha dog of the prison? You beat up everybody else in the prison. So, this is a guy who's a boxer and who just sees Manny as this really great tough guy, but he doesn't understand that Manny was just doing it because the best position to be in prison is at the top as the alpha, where you get to call the shots because you're beating down everybody else beneath you. And once again, Buck is learning the wrong lessons from the wrong guy.
Now, you gave a great shout out to a couple supporting characters. I'm going to go around again, just to quickly shout out anybody you want. I'm going to start real quick, then I'll go to Lance. I've got to shout out a guy. He has been in several of my favorite movies, and I didn't realize it was the same guy every time. He was in a Neil Simon movie in the past called Seems Like Old Times, where he plays Chester, a chauffeur, and he's hilarious in it. He played Smalls in The Thing, and here he is in this movie playing a character who's against type. He's kind of a coward and doesn't want to take any responsibility for anything, and just wants to be there and gets paid. And I'm talking about T.K. Carter as Dave Prince in this movie. I really enjoyed his performance, and he's not in a lot of scenes, but what he's in, I enjoyed watching him. Now, he wasn't a scene stealer. He didn't grab everything, but as a supporting actor to some of the other characters, specifically Barstow, I thought he was really good. So I enjoyed his performance. Anybody stand out for you for the supporting role, Lance?
Yeah, I definitely think that Kyle Hefner as Barstow, I mean, is kind of has a similar context to DeMornay's character, Sarah. He makes a mistake. I mean, he thinks he's this brilliant guy that's in charge of this new computerized system that's going to save everything, and then finds out, no, it doesn't work like it's supposed to when the shit hits the fan. So his world gets shattered as well. You see his cockiness turn to desperation, but he still is the voice of reason, saving lives. You know what I mean? He's probably the only person that still has that slight glow of a halo over his head, because he is trying desperately. And what does he get out of it? He gets his head dumped in his own toilet full of piss. That's your reward for trying to be a smart guy. I mean, he played it well. He played it perfectly. And I liked how he starts off that smarmy know-it-all and then just goes into sweaty desperation mode for the second half of the movie. I thought he did an extremely good job.
It's an ugly movie, though. I mean, in a trite movie, this guy will be rewarded for his virtuousness and his desire to do the right thing, and instead he gets the shit kicked out of him and scared by the lunatic who's the warden. So there it is.
Yeah. That was the scene that made me hate him. Yeah, completely.
What about you, Steve? Any supporting character you want to point out real quick?
Yeah, I will say very briefly that this movie is very much about misplaced faith, and I think when it comes to Barstow, his misplaced faith is in technology. He thinks that technology and science will solve any problem, and then it turns out no, the thing that you created, the thing that you built, is the problem, and he sees that too late to do anything to fix it. As far as other supporting characters, I'm just going to shout out Danny Trejo. This was his first major role.
Yeah.
And I will say it was perfect casting for him, especially for a first-time actor who, is mainly known for playing heavies, Machete and, the knife thrower in Desperado and things like this. And one of the reasons why he was so good for that role is that Trejo had actually been on the inside. He had been to prison. And, he was just basically playing that guy that he was when he was in jail. And he does a very good job in the very short amount of time that he has.
Presence. We've talked about charisma and presence. He was there.
Yeah, I like that as well. Now, before we get into the filmmaking aspect, another one of these philosophy questions that arose out of this movie, and we hit on it a little bit, but this is the kind of thing that we studied where I was in university all the time, which is personality types and making the hard decision and how you react to that. And I thought that the scene where they eventually decided to rail the car, and the three people involved in it, which are Dave Prince, Barstow, and then Baron Harkonnen. I can't remember his name, so we'll just call him Baron Harkonnen. Said a lot. And I'm going to put it around to you guys to put your 2 cents in, but I thought that the reactions of the characters said who they were in that point in time. I thought Barstow was able to make the hard decision, but he's wounded for it. Harkonnen is a complete lunatic who's only worried about the bottom line, and Prince is a coward who didn't want to make the hard decision. So what did you guys get the same feeling from that scene, or what did you take from it, if you took anything? I'm going to go to Steve first.
Oh yeah, that was very much what I got from it. It's very much goes to the idea that it is under pressure that truly reveals who you are. And we definitely see that they're all under pressure and they have to get something done now. They don't have, time to mess around. And all Kenneth McMillan wants to do, is bottom line and money, and what's going to save his ass. And the only one who seems to really care enough to do the right thing in that moment is Barstow. The problem is that his courage kind of ends at that point, especially when he goes up against the warden, who, I mean, is frankly a big bully. But in that moment, you kind of see this. He really is the one person that's trying to help people, even if he really can't see it through.
Well, I will say to Lance, watching the performance, the movement and body language of the performers, and I wanted your take on this, was telling, because without saying anything, you could see that Barstow deflates, but is resolute, and that this is the right thing to do when, the derailing in the second time when they make the final decision. Prince shrinks away. Meanwhile, the Baron, the owner of the company, is giddy over the fact that they're going to do it. And all of this came across in body language and emotion. So what did you think about that?
Well, that's the kind of performers you want. You can do more by saying less. And with Barstow, you can see the idea of, when they find out that there's criminals on the train, sure, it's easier to derail it, because then they're resigned to, okay, they're not human. Let's do this, but the train is passing by a chemical plant and there's still people that live around there. So even then it's like, oh, let's save the chemical plant. Let's save the society around it, just long enough so that we can get rid of these two vermin of society. And then they realize that, there was a co-engineer on there, and he changes his tune pretty quick, to the dismay of the owner of the train, and everybody else just backs off. They don't want to make that decision. But you can still see that it's in him that it's all wrong, no matter what. Even in the tail end, it's still wrong. And that's the thing he's going to have to live with, that and his technology that failed. So, it's still a man-made technology. It's still physical. It's still physical labor. It's still, people need to be involved. And that's where I think you see his world crash. Even when they send the old man out there, to put it on an alternate track, you can see the giddiness in that old man, the railway runner, saying this is going to be a heck of a spectacle. He gets to watch, a train derail, and then he sees that, there's someone else aboard, there's people aboard, which changes everything. So I think those revelations are good character arcs, because they think one thing's going to happen, something is revealed, and then boom, their whole attitude changes or gets confused. I think that's good storytelling. That's solid storytelling, and that is held together by great performance.
Absolutely. All right, let's get into, like I said, we had a lot to get into with this movie, and we cannot give short shrift to the filmmaking process here, because there's a lot that went into it, from cinematography to set design to makeup to stunts. It's all here. So I'm going to go around the horn, and there's a number of things I wanted to cover, but I'm going to go around the horn and we'll hit them as we get to them. So Lance, what did you want? Would you like to bring up first when it came to the process of making this film? So,
well, obviously, this is old school. This is 1985, so no CGI, and it's practical, and you just get out there and you make the film. Um, shot in Montana, shot in Alaska, shot in California, in warehouses and old warehouses that were wineries and studios, building 2 sets of miniatures to integrate with the live action, or it is live action, to integrate, with the rest of the film. I mean, it all fits together seamlessly, and that is true filmmaking. It's hard to tell where the miniatures are. They're in second unit shots. They're in the crashes. I mean, it comes together seamlessly. Nobody was hurt. They had professional mountaineers out there to professionally harness people on the trains and make sure they were secure. They were shooting 3 cameras at a time, which is not traditional because, usually you use 1 camera and get all the angles. But because, everything was so complicated, they would shoot 3 angles at one time. And okay, we got the shot, and one fell swoop. Let's move on. That's a very good use of your production time and your people, even though you're adding 3 different cameras with 3 different crews. But I think that's the way to do it. I also like the documentary film style of just putting the camera anywhere you can to get the performances, but still keeping an eye line so that it has that documentary feel to it, so that it isn't a perfect framing of something, but the frame works for the performer in that tight circumstance, which is in the cab of a train or in a prison cell. You get the feeling of claustrophobia. You get the feeling of being trapped, and it's a bleak look. The film is bleak. There is not a glamour shot in this film from beginning to end, and that's a hard thing to achieve.
I didn't get time to do all the research I wanted to on this, but maybe you know the answer to this. There are a number of scenes where they are in very, very harsh conditions. Do you know if that was on a sound set, a sound stage, or was they shooting on a location with wintry conditions like that and braving that to do the film? So
it was twofold. It was body doubles on second unit doing a lot of the exterior stuff on location, which I think they did first. They did a lot of the second unit first. Then they took it into a sound stage, which is big fans, fake snow. It's pretty impressive and very seamless how they can put all that together. And usually the giveaway might be, if you have a chance to look at it, is to see if they have breath when they're outside.
Yeah.
But traveling at 80 miles an hour at that speed, I'm not even sure that's possible. I'm not sure, in those sub-zero temperatures. But they kept it safe. I think there was a helicopter crash, and I don't know if it was on scouting locations or something, but that I don't think it had anything to do directly with filming. But it was just the circumstances are very harsh, and you go there to capture the environment. That's the beauty of filmmaking at times. You can see how plastic and artificial it is when it's all exclusively in a soundstage. You accept the viewer and you go along with it. But a film like this, it was done all practically. So I think that's what captures an audience even more, when it's as close to practicality as possible, rather than recreated in a computer.
Well, there were a lot of shots on the exterior of the train going through what looked like a blizzard, and it felt real. So, I was like, good Lord, this is some tough conditions. So if they were out there filming in that, I mean, that's got to present its own challenges as well. So
absolutely. It's a film I wouldn't have made. I would have been, hell no. This sounds like a nightmare. Forget it.
Yeah. Steve, what about you? Anything about the filmmaking process you saw?
I will say I love how this movie is so dirty and grungy and mundane. Like, they managed to take some glamorous people and make them look so not glamorous. Particularly like Rebecca DeMornay. I mean, that woman was gorgeous for the longest time. And she was doing like Risky Business a couple of years before that, and then she was doing like Hand That Rocks the Cradle. I mean, this is somebody who's really, really well known, for looking good. And they made her look so normal and mundane and, so convincing as a woman working on a train. Like you would not have guessed. You have to look up close for her for you to see it. It's the same person. That's impressive work. That is impressive work. And some of it is like the makeup people, the people that put all the time into, making her look the character. Some of it's the costume design. And a lot of it is Rebecca DeMornay playing it like that. So this is really like all the elements of the production, making it look good. You can definitely tell that there's some tight editing. There's definitely like you'll see like a shot of like the train as it's moving. You're looking at like the connection between the two cars, and then it'll go up and it'll be in a sound stage. And it doesn't look like that. It is very, very well played, and I think they did some pretty good job. Considering it's a practical movie, considering that this was pre CGI. And I would say maybe it might even be one of the last movies that was like that, because Terminator 2 was like a few years after this. So yeah, I think it is definitely a movie that I think I don't want to say they perfected it, but I would say that it is one of the better examples of a movie of that kind before the shift to CGI.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah, because I think it was The Abyss in 1989 came out just a few years later, which was okay. Here's the latest and greatest.
Which
it was Lucas and Cameron that changed the game on that.
They I just watched a documentary on how they did that effect for The Abyss, and talk about at least when you did computer graphics then you earned it. There weren't all the tools and stuff that you have now that make it much, much easier. You had to program it all, but that is a discussion for another time. But the amount of work that went behind the CGI effects of that movie are unbelievable. I'm going to bring up two things. One is I'm going to first I want to give a shout out to one specific effect in the makeup. And that was if you've ever been outside on a cold day when the wind is blowing and you get that frost burn almost effect and your face darkens and it chafes. They did that on the exposed skin of all of these characters, and the effect looks so realistic, it's almost painful at times. You could feel it on your own cheeks. I thought that was pretty damn impressive, the way that they did that. And it was another point, like Steve was talking about, of making it just ugly. Like the people, they did not hold anything back. The second part I'm going to bring up is the stunts. Now, the stunt work in this film, there's no huge heroic stunts. There's no Indiana Jones, being able to come out from behind the truck and crawl up the whip and get on the thing. But at the same time, Jon Voight has a period where he's being dragged underneath the train, but they're very much average Joe stunts. Like they look like the kind of things that an average Joe would do. And they come off as, I'm going to almost say practical, like a practical effect. So there was nothing crazy about anything he was doing. It was just incredibly dangerous, if you were doing it in real life. And I appreciated that. It grounded the movie some more, but it gave us genuine moments of action and thrill and suspense. So that was a little bit different. It wasn't big Hollywood. It was just, we need a guy who is just saying F it and is going to jump off the front of this train going 80 miles an hour and try and hold on. And, and it wasn't a dude with like suspenseful music and he's going to jump with the explosion in the background. It was just a guy doing that. And I appreciated that. It was really, really good.
Yeah. And it looks like it hurts.
Yeah. Yeah. The last part I'm going to bring up, and then we're going to talk a little bit about the ending before we wrap this up, is I want to talk about the costuming in this film. There are a lot of really smart choices here. There's a lot of brave choices here. And I'm going to point out one of each. First, the smart choice. And it has to do with the writing and the costuming. there's a scene where they need to survive being out in the cold and getting through cold water. So they grease themselves up and then cover themselves with plastic wrap before putting the clothes back on. Now, you may know a person who has swam the Hudson River in the middle of February, who Vaselined himself up to do that. It is a legitimate way to keep yourselves warm. The problem is that eventually it can rub off. Plus, you can have problems with overheating and things like that. But I thought that was just such a smart decision to do that and to actually show it in costume. So they had them give them it's part of costuming. They're getting dressed up like this and then putting them in that cold. It's not pleasant. It's not fun. But I enjoyed that. And I thought that was a big deal in the movie. I really got that. The other one that I thought was realistic is, did you notice that there was one, excuse the language, folks, but we've got to use the vernacular, bitch in the film?
Yeah.
And he is holding he's being the ring girl for the boxing match, you know?
Yep.
And they didn't shy away from it. It's brave. I mean, this is 1985, and you're showing someone who is clearly the prison bitch, you know? So it's like, who are you? Who are you to be this brave making a film like this? But, you know, shout out to them for doing it. I thought it was pretty impressive. You know, later on, you know, it would become a joke type thing to do and more accepted. But back then, that's pretty avant-garde. You know, it was a thing that you didn't talk about, the fact that, you know, when guys go to prison, there's the alphas, and then there's some of them, they're going to be that guy, and some of them are going to embrace it, you know? So pretty fascinating. So before we wrap up here, let's talk about the ending, because it's interesting. It's very interesting, and I want to go to Lance first on it. Let me just sum up that the ending, we see Manny, he has handcuffed the prison warden inside the train. He separates the trains. He gets up on top of the train car, leaning forward into his destiny, holding on as the train is still barreling down the tracks. And then we fade to black, and up comes a quote from Richard III. And that's it. That's the end of the movie. And so I wanted to hear from you both what you thought about the ending, what you think it means, and then we'll go ahead and put an end to this pod. So go to Lance first.
I'm extremely satisfied with the ending. You know, I think it was played very well. We didn't need any kind of big wreck explosion. We didn't need to see him flying off into oblivion. All we know is that he made the jump. He can stop the train and save his life, but he knows that it will lead to another impending doom, especially if he leaves his nemesis alive, the warden. You know, he's doomed in all way whatsoever. But what does he get to do? He's doing this on his own terms, and he's ridding the world of something just as bad as, if not worse than he is. It's a fitting ending. And I think, you know, remembering this movie back in '85, I thought that was very poignant. It was very, okay, this is a fitting ending. This is all it needs to be. And I never heard anybody really say anything different about it. You know, I liked it. I think that's good writing. And it does have that Kurosawa feel to it. You know, it does, from his previous drafts. You know, the whatever that draft was, I'd like to see a look at it from 1965. But I think it's fitting. I really liked that ending, and I think it's all that it needs to be.
Interesting. I agree with you. I got a few points that I'm curious to hear your pushback on them, but great points on all of that. So, and I can't disagree with it. Steve.
I will say that as I was watching this movie, I kind of got the feeling, you know, Manny's not going to survive this. I just had that feeling that he was not going to survive this. And I'm like, you know, it would be kind of cool if, you know, if he decides to go to his end, you know, with the warden, and, you know, and it just seemed like that's basically where this movie was going to go. I just got to have that feeling about it, sometimes as a writer, you kind of develop certain instincts for where a story will go as you see it. And I think that basically hit me. So I wasn't surprised by it. But at the same time, it's like, yeah, it just feels like this is the natural course of where Manny's life is going to go. It's, he's going to die the way he wants to, whether it makes sense or not. And so, it's like, yeah. And I was thinking, he could have saved himself. He could have if he wanted to. He could just be on the other side of the connecting car. He absolutely could have done that and just let him go to his death. And yeah, I'll be over on this side. No, he didn't. He didn't. He wanted to be in the front car, going to his death with the warden. And I'm just like, you know what, that absolutely works for me. I don't have a problem with that. And the quote I thought was really interesting. I can't really ignore a Shakespeare quote. And where it's talking about, I have no pity, therefore I'm not, I have no pity, therefore I'm not a beast. And it's like, he's not a beast at all, really. He has no pity, but he knows he has no pity. And, he's choosing as a man, this is where I'm going. This is where my life ends. And, that's just it. I'm just going to embrace that. I'm not going to run away from my destiny.
Well, I had 2 points I was going to bring up. One is the quote. I think the quote speaks to something even larger than that, though.
Yeah.
I mean, it's part of what's in Richard III, but it also, putting it in this movie at the end, I think really speaks to the fact that we have set ourselves apart from nature and made ourselves worse off for it because we have no pity,
Mm-hmm.
And with the technology and everything, it's a pretty amazing quote to put back there. And one wonders, did Kurosawa pick that out, or did the new writers pick that out? So
it feels like a Kurosawa. It feels like a Kurosawa quote to me. But
yeah, it does feel like Kurosawa. But the funny thing that I think contrasts that, maybe not even really. It doesn't contrast it. Does it complement it? When Sarah accuses Manny of being an animal, she says, "You're an animal." And he says, "No, worse, human."
Yeah.
And,
wow! I didn't pick that up. That's a great point.
Yeah.
And to me, that kind of says it all. Like, he's called an animal through the whole movie, but then he's resigned to the fact that he's worse than an animal. He's human. Yeah. And there was that silence after he says that. Mm-hmm. I mean, you can't argue that fact. You can't argue it. Yeah. So once again,
it kind of reminds me a little bit of Dune, where Paul is taking the Jam Gabar thing, and you're a young human because you didn't recoil, from the box like an animal. You were there like a man, and I can't help but think that Manny's in many ways similar. Like, he's aware of pain, he's aware of all of these things. He's choosing to do what he's doing, and that's the man.
Right, which is when that's on your when you consciously do it, that's a choice. Animals can work off of instinct, whereas a person, they are sometimes run by emotion. That's how they make it happen. So this movie's, you can see the Kurosawa influence in it. You can definitely see it.
And that's so interesting because this movie, I mean, at first glance, this is a prison drama that turns into a suspense, with some action scenes. But there's a lot going on underneath the water in this movie. There's a lot of depth to this movie, which makes it a fascinating watch. I think it's a fascinating rewatch. It's one of those movies that I'll probably rewatch, many times over the years and get something new out of. The thing I was going to point out, when the ending happened, I was of two minds. The cinephile in me was like, this is great. I love the way that they let it hang. I don't know what happens to Buck and Sarah. I really don't need to know. I can imagine what happens to them. I could put whatever I want in there. But then there was a part of me that wanted the big bang. And I was like, well, why am I doing that? And it made me examine it. And it's like, I think it kind of put my finger on it's the Michael Bay effect. I've been Michael Bayed into wanting the big explosion, the big reveal, the tie up, the credits roll with the soundtrack music blasting, the whole thing. And I was like, I was disappointed when I realized that as much as I appreciate all these movies, there was a part of me that was looking for the Michael Bay ending, and do you think that's legitimate? Either one of you guys. So
Oh yeah, we've been conditioned into seeing all these things because of all these modern movies that have done that, and a lot of them follow the same formula. I wasn't so bothered by that. In fact, I was sort of thinking, just like a white light, enveloping everything and then fade to white and back to black, it would have been perfectly fine. There are a lot of ways that you can do it that are perfectly serviceable. It's just that everybody's going for the big, bang because that's what catches attention to modern audiences, and I don't think you necessarily need to do that.
Before Lance gives his answer, I mean, I can even see the scene in my head where it's like a close up and the train crashes and John Voight's going through the air, coming towards the camera, flipping off the camera, and then fade to black because he's going out like a rebel with the explosion and everything. It's like, and then Danger Zone plays in the background.
Yeah, I will say that I think there are likely two ways that things go after this anyway. You can extrapolate certain things. One is that Buck being an idiot, he'll end up getting caught and get thrown back to jail. Or he actually listens to Manny, kind of saying, yeah, you gave me my life, so I'm going to do what you told me to do. So which one it is, it's up to you. I'm not going to tell you, but I mean, I would say those are the most likely ways things go.
What about you, Lance? What did you think about it?
Well, obviously there's a conditioning that commercial movies have imposed on modern audiences, which is extremely damaging. The triteness, the redundancy, the derivative nature of remanufacturing the Big Bang, the gigantic ending, all that stuff. But we're still in the mid 80s where you can still have those really cool art house, high budgeted movies that are poignant, that are an action flick like this flick. I consider this flick an action flick because it's intense from beginning to absolute end. I mean, that is very hard to do. But I have to say, there's always a touch of the foreign element that I think is really fun to explore in American cinema. This is a Russian director. He may have been influenced. Andrei, and it's really hard to say his last name, I'll probably mutilate it, Konachekhovsky. But anyways, we're talking probably a foreigner heavily influenced by American movies, but on the same token, realizes he does not want to make that movie, but he wants to make this movie in the system. And it happened. I mean, Jon Voight was hot. I mean, he was one of the biggest names you could secure at that time. And many people were auditioned for that part that were huge. You get the influence of Akira Kurosawa. You know what I mean? You get this Japanese influence. So you got Russian point of view, a Japanese point of view, and then you have the American element within it, which I think is a dynamic mix for original storytelling, because I don't think they were affected by the commercialism of movies even during the day. Whereas now, they have a Runaway Train movie. It would probably be slapstick gags, cheesy CGI, gratuitous violence, and they would throw a line or two of philosophical nature in to try to say that they have substance.
Well, listening to you both talk, I think the thing that gets me, and I just looked it up, 1985 movies, but I wanted to look at action movies in particular. Nowadays, every movie seems to be a variation on the same theme, especially if they're genre movies, versus here are the 1985 action movies that came out that year. So you've got this one, you got King Solomon's Mines, you got Mad Max Beyond Thunderdome, you got Remo Williams, you got Commando, which is
interesting how many of these are movies we covered previously.
Red Sonja, American Ninja. Then you got schlock like Jim Cotta, you got Rambo, First Blood Part 2 came out. I mean, you've got the whole gamut of the different types of action movies there, and I could go on. I mean, I think Chuck Norris had 8,000 movies out that year. So, it's like there was a little bit of something for everybody, and it's like if your shtick wasn't Arnold saying one-liners, or if you wanted something different, you could go pull in Rambo, which was ridiculous in its own way, totally different from First Blood. But don't get me started on that. Right. We could talk about
First
that.
Blood is so much better in my mind.
Yeah. So I mean, pretty amazing stuff. So it is interesting, and I was a little, I'm not gonna say disappointed, but I was like, wow, it's like I really had that yearning for, the big climax of Hollywood blockbuster when this movie really didn't need it, really didn't need it. So
I was unsure. I was unsure what the reaction would be, because I don't know if Jeff has seen this film, but I was surprised neither one of you have seen it. And I think, man, I could have went, for our degrees of separation, I could have went so many different ways from Identity. But then I'm thinking this movie was just standing out in my head. Every time I see Rebecca DeMornay, I think of, first and foremost, Runaway Train, not the glamour, beauty, whatever, hairstyles, nudity, whatever you want to call it. I think of Runaway Train. So she's like that Meryl Streep. She's like that Sigourney Weaver. She's like that Glenn Close. I mean, she's of that era. And this movie, I think, was extremely impressive. How she handled this character and the entire look of it. It was amazing.
Yeah, I just noticed I got to mention one last action movie from that time. A great movie, Enemy Mine. So. Yeah.
I will say probably part of the problem is that too many movies in later time have gone the Save the Cat route. If you want to go into Save the Cat, I mean, we discussed it on In the Line of Fire pretty thoroughly. So, but it's just a very formulaic way that Hollywood structures scripts, and there's a certain pattern, and a lot of these movies follow that pattern, and I think it's gotten too formulaic and corporate.
Well, and not only that, even if nowadays Manny would live, and you would have the continuing adventures of Manny. You know what I mean? That's the route I think a lot of modern films go. They have to, if it's a hit, we want to use a pun, we want to ride that train all the end. You know what I mean? It's ridiculous. You can just let a movie end. Let it end.
Well, that's what I was going to say. Is in a lot of modern movies, and you could take this as us criticizing, or just take it as constructive criticism, which I think is what we're doing here. But in a movie like this, with this ending, it could be considered a twist, and it wouldn't be a twist in the sense that we're doing something. This is how it's going to end. We're just going to, as you said, let it end and let the audience live with it and decide. Instead, it would have been a marketing tool. It's like, oh, the big twist to the movie, and and even the twists are formulaic, and it's like, just let the people make their art, and let the art speak to the viewer, because it's going to mean something different to everybody, Yeah,
absolutely. And well, once again, it always goes back to why we do this, so that we can say, hey, people, go check out this flick. It's on Tubi right now. Go check out Runaway Train. I mean, it's going to blow your mind. And a lot of times people will bite, and they'll be like, oh, wow, that was a pretty dang good flick. And then you'll hear, well, why don't they make movies like that anymore? It's like, hey, they ruined it. What can you say?
Well, plus, this movie can make you uncomfortable, and good movies can do that. Even though it's an action movie, there's a lot to think about here, and a lot to examine in your own life, I enjoyed that. I like movies that make me think. Unfortunately, it made me reflect on the fact that I've got a secret crush on Michael Bay, evidently, which is very disturbing to find out. So, I may go watch Transformers after this, and then go flagellate myself or something. So there it is.
Well, I think you should do that. Flagellate yourself before you watch Transformers.
All right. So let's tie this thing up. Let's get some final thoughts before we say goodbye. So, Steve, final thoughts on this film.
Surprisingly good. I really came in not knowing this movie at all, not really knowing anything about it. And it took me a little bit of time to get into it, because a lot of it, or the first act, is really kind of spent establishing prison and, Manny's life in prison, and Buck and all of that. And when they get out of prison, that to me is where things start really getting interesting. And then it just ratchets up from there as the train, keeps moving faster, so does the story. And I kind of dig that. And and they managed to make things feel mundane, as you said. It doesn't feel like a glamorized Hollywood movie. They managed to make some of the most glamorous people in the world look unglamorous, which I think is really interesting. And yet everything is riveting. Everything serves the story. Everything is just really well thought out. And some of it probably is, Japanese Japanese writer, Russian director, American actors, and all of this, coming in to create something that's truly unique. And I got to respect that.
I'm assuming Lee Marvin would have been Manny.
Yeah.
I've got to assume that.
You know what? If they had done the actual Kurosawa thing, if Kurosawa had done the movie that he wanted with Lee Marvin and Henry Fonda, I think it was, that would have been awesome. I would have loved to have seen it. I think a lot of people would have.
Yeah. Final thoughts, Lance.
Hey, it's a stellar flick. I think from an entertainment point of view and a filmmaking point of view, it's a case study of how things can be done right. I'm not saying go and rip it off, redo it, remake it, do any of that. I'm saying I think there are these gems. There's too many gems out there that people aren't aware of because they're beat over the head by, I don't know, go see Willy Wonka, go see this, stuff that's derivative. They're waiting for, Wolverine and the Hulk to come and save the day. And that's not what cinema is. What this movie is pure 100% cinema. This is unique. It is a very unique movie. It's hard to do that nowadays. You got to work very hard. And of course, is it going to catch on? The movie did its business, but it wasn't a surefire hit. It wasn't a surefire hit. The Canon company was already filing bankruptcy. You know what I mean? We were losing these. We were losing Corelco and Canon and Orion. We were losing in the 80s the risk takers. But yet we're talking about these films 35 years later, almost 40 years later. The 80s were poignant in that way. You had some of the best and some of the worst, 50-50 coming out of the 80s. And there's never been a decade like that. And this is one of those movies that I think just stands out and is definitely worth a watch.
The last thing I'm going to say is that this movie, even though it's an 80s movie, you definitely see 80s part of it. I think it's also a throwback. It feels very 70s to me. This movie feels like the kind of movie that could have lived alongside Starsky and Hutch, the TV series,
It's very French Connection.
70s movies had this real dirty, gritty, real life lived in feel to them. 80s was starting to get a lot of the action movies and other movies were stylish. They had a style to them. Another 1985 action movie at this time was Romancing the Stone. It's an enjoyable movie, but it's got a feel to it. It's got the song to it. It's got everything. This movie felt like, we're just going to put it all out on the table and show it to you, warts and all, and you're going to take it in and you are going to have to digest this film. That was kind of the spirit of 70s cinema, and I really got that feel out of it and I appreciated it. So I thought that was very interesting. And I enjoyed this film. This film was not on my radar at all. I'd never heard of it ever, and I enjoyed watching it. Like I said, it took me also, like Steve, a little bit time to get into it because at first I was like, where's the Runaway Train? So, but it was smart the way it got there. And I really did enjoy it once we got there and everything that led up to it. So it was really good. So thank you for that. So that is our discussion of Runaway Train from 1985. We will be back next week. Jeff, who was not able to make it tonight, will be picking the next movie. If he is not able to make it, well, wait a minute. Is it Jeff next or is it Steve?
I think it's Steve.
Yeah,
I think it's mine. I do have something in mind for it. We'll talk about it after show.
Okay,
cool.
So Steve will be picking the next movie for us, which will be up next Friday. Remember, everybody out there, please click like and subscribe on the videos. They help us quite a bit. They help us with our algorithm. They help other people find our videos so they can enjoy this content as well. So that would be a great help. And thank you so much for watching. We love doing this. It's a passion project for us. And we love when you come on and interact or watch the videos and everything. It's always humbling. I think I can speak for all of us. When we watch the numbers go up and the number of people who have viewed our videos, it is really, really cool. So thank you for that.
Yeah, I think that's a good shout out to the people that are catching on to what we're doing here in our little ragtag group of cinema crusaders here. I think it's pretty cool.
Yeah. So remember, make sure that you keep that popcorn warm or hot even. Get some butter on it. Find yourself a comfy chair this weekend and make sure that you watch some cinema this weekend. Maybe even get yourself a copy of Runaway Train and watch that. Till next time, on behalf of myself and my fellow Cinema Crusaders, thank you very much. We'll see you, everybody.
See ya.
Take care.